Now available on Indiegogo is my latest documentary, Here Comes a New Challenger, celebrating the legacy of the most influential fighting game ever made, Street Fighter II. The film will explore its development, its cultural impact, its updates with the likes of Champion Edition and Hyper Fighting, the merchandise, the home console releases, the live action movie and more. We have interviews with those who worked for Capcom, such as James Goddard and Jeff Walker, director of the live action movie Stephen E. D'Souza, artist Mick McGinty, director and writer of Assassin's Fist Joey Anser, and more. We are still working hard on this production and aim to add more names to the lineup. Your chance to back the production ends on the 19th of September. So if you want to get involved, like having your name in the credits and getting yourself a physical copy of the documentary, then follow the link below. Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here. For this audio commentary, I'm joined by Audi Sorlie to discuss the live-action movie Street Fighter, starring action superstar Jean-Claude Van Damme. Audi popped up on my recent commentary to the animated movie on Street Fighter 2. He's already provided a commentary track to this film for the recent Blu-ray release by 88 Films. But Audi has no problem discussing the film again, as he's a big fan of this 90s blockbuster cheese fest. So how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I think my life now has just become a rotating schedule of watching this film with different people.
But you enjoy it, so it's fine.
Yeah. Some people will call it an endless nightmare, but for me, it's just Tuesday.
Okay, well folks, if you wish to sync this commentary with your own copy of the film, put the timestamp to 0 and press play. Now. The Universal cut of this movie, the US domestic version, has the amazing transition of the Universal logo into the Street Fighter main title, which I think for everyone outside the USA have the sort of Columbia TriStar one, which doesn't have that great transition, but it's kind of half there, isn't it?
Yeah, they replicated it, but man, how awesome was that original opening though? I think my VHS had that, and it's just one of the coolest kind of transitions from a production company, publisher, distributor, whatever, into, a movie logo.
It really kind of throws you straight into the film, this whole opening sequence. I remember as a kid, well, I wasn't really a kid, I was kind of an early teenager, but I was kind of it sort of sucks you in straight away. And it's very sort of energetic sort of opening act, and it sort of comes with a bit of a slump during the middle, but this sequence here that tries to sort of show you what's happening throughout the world, what M. Bison is up to, and his demands.
I remember that this kind of shocked me at the time. When I saw this in the theaters, even though I was too young, they let me in, and for at least for the rating that we had up here north. And I was kind of shocked by this, just simply because these images were very, representative of what was on TV at the time, because we had just had the Gulf War, and then here, our European forces were dealing with the Balkans at the time. So I was like, wow, this is pretty serious. Like, Bison must be pretty evil. I took it very seriously, and I was kind of impacted by the fact that this, in the beginning, that this seemed like it was pretty heavy stuff.
Well, yeah, I had no real expectations of what the movie would be like, and seeing this kind of straight away, it sort of shifts direction from the video game into this kind of somewhat military kind of action movie straight away, where you think, oh, okay, this is Chun-Li, she's a news reporter, okay, and well, at the time, we didn't really. There wasn't really a definitive sort of background to these characters. They were sort of loosely told in sort of instruction manuals, or maybe if you'd read, maybe the player's guide might have a little bit more information. But it was a little bit of a sort of shock to the system, not really in a bad way, but I was just slightly confused. And this sequence here, where it says, based on the video game by Capcom, D'Souza really sort of shows you that sort of video game kind of angle, where it's kind of one-on-one fighter. Then he gets his neck broken, which is cut from the UK cut. As a kid, I remember.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that was cut on what I saw as well. I remember when I was doing the research for this on the Blu-ray, I was like, wait, I don't remember this. And so it was definitely cut.
Yeah.
I can kind of see why they made that cut, I suppose, for the sense that like this was for kids technically, for the distributor, from the distributor's standpoint, this was supposed to be for the kids. And De Souza, being the writer and producer that he is, and here for the first time, I think, and only time, a director. Um, he's someone that's known for kind of blending comedy, action, and violence. So yeah, I can kind of see why that cut was made.
The whole movie has a large number of cuts made to it by the MPAA due to the sort of at the time there were sort of school shootings, wasn't there? And and the MPAA was sort of getting very kind of wary about violence, and this movie was given like an R rating, and so to cut it down, it was end up being a PG. And it was, well, that's too soft for what they wanted. So they wanted a PG-13. So they had to throw in a swear word, which we'll kind of see
Yes.
about 2/3 into the movie. But they have these sort of odd bits of necks being broken, which are pretty. I don't know how they show them in the film are pretty flimsy. It's nothing too dramatic or sort of violent. But yeah, I only saw that sort of neck break come the Laserdisc when I got hold of it. I was like, oh, there's an extra bit there.
Yeah. It was the same for me, and I'm kind of curious because again, yeah, the R-rated cut. I would be curious to kind of see it because I think if we saw it completely uncut from that, or initial work print, I have a feeling it wouldn't be that violent by today's standards at all. I think it would just basically be. I think that rating came from the fact that this was a video game movie, and at the time, the MPAA and all the other kind of parental groups saw video games as toys, and being based on the video game, it had a lot more eyes on it and came under a lot more scrutiny, and therefore probably was unfairly rated.
Oh, for sure. I remember messaging Stephen De Souza. I think after I'd finished Last Action Heroes documentary, and sort of saying it would be nice to one day see that cut of the movie. I mean, he's probably forgotten about it, really. But he might have like a VHS copy somewhere floating around in his garage. But I think a lot of the violence would obviously it's taken away from the action scenes, but I think may just be a few kind of hits that seem slightly dubious to the MPAA, which they cut. But I don't think we're going to see something that's like a huge leap in violence. Obviously, Vega's supposed to get impaled on his claw, isn't he, later on? But I don't know.
Yes, I think that was shown to a greater detail, or like he has. I think it was like a pool of blood underneath him. Again, it seemed like that what was cut was still not graphic. It was just suggestive to the fact that he had landed on the claw, and then during reshoots, I guess they changed that.
So, Audie, what was your first introduction to this film? Was it in the video game magazines?
Oh, it was definitely the magazines.
It's the same for me.
Yeah, for me it was I think it was CVG that had a big expose on this, or at least the rumor mill. Because I remember, and something I talked about the Blu-ray as well. I remember, here we are seeing Damien Chapa and Byron Mann as Ryu and Ken. But I remember that the early rumor mills had this as Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer. I think this was something they made up, to be fair, and just kind of like, hey, I like Top Gun, and then put their favorite actors in these roles. I don't know if Tom Cruise would have worked as they do, but I remember reading that at the same time we were being made aware that Mortal Kombat was come out. The animated film was being dubbed, so it just seemed like, for me, a blessing in a new era, because here I was a huge video game fan, and these video games were now becoming movies. And by the time I found out that Stephen De Souza was the director, no less, I was super excited, because, man, talk about someone with a pedigree.
Well, he'd written, Commando, Die Hard, Ricochet. I think Ricochet is one movie that sort of got slated, then sort of got, got praise later on in the years, but he was the guy to go to for these kind of big blockbusters. Had a mix of great action and humour, and for Capcom to sort of strike a balance with an audience, I think he would seem on paper the ideal choice.
We, by the way, see there in the background the legendary Benny Urquidez is there. And he was the fight choreographer for at least parts of the film. This is kind of, maybe you know more than me because you've actually interviewed him by this point. But I do know that there was 2 fight choreographers, and it's kind of unclear why either of them were changed out. But I think for these scenes with Byron, it's very clear that it's Urquidez, because Urquidez was someone that could make anyone look good, right? And Byron looks like $1 million, and he had not had martial arts training prior to this film. But I had no idea about that really until much later in life, because I thought Byron Man was excellent in this film, really, for what he's given. And he looks excellent in the fight scenes, and he credits Benny Urquidez for that.
Well, Byron just gets better and better throughout the film, doesn't he? But by the end, when he's fighting Vega, he's like, you wouldn't think he wasn't a professional. He seems completely up the level with Jean-Claude.
Yeah.
And then also when he gets to face off against Vega in the cage, he's spinning that kind of sword like a professional. You just didn't think. He just kind of learned it on the fly 30 minutes earlier.
Yeah, right. That's an amazing story. We'll get to that. Oh, yeah, Dalsim, Robin Seth.
Yeah, from Temple of Doom, and I think Gandhi as well.
Yes,
he was in. This is the one kind of set which I think does show its kind of cheap side. It feels like something out of a TV show, something like Superboy or something, from like season 2 or 3.
This kind of looks like something out of a Bela Lugosi movie, right? Like something out of a 50s sort of sci-fi monster movie. Which maybe is the point, because this also is all about doing references, and this is a Universal film, so it could be even directly sort of based on something like this.
I have no problem with that, the intent. I think it's just like, I just think maybe the production design team, because when he sat down, then the whole set just wobbled.
It wobbles, yeah, I noticed that too. And poor Seth, because he was, by even this point, a pretty highly respected actor, and he was given this role of Dalsim, and it's something we talked extensively about on the Blu-ray. But when it came to making a live action film, I think what people generally have an issue with is the fact that it's not very authentic to the original source material. But by this time, as you mentioned earlier, the lore was really not established. The lore would become established as they created the animated film. And then really not by Capcom internally so much as it was all these different factors requiring an extensive lore, including this film, like this live action film. But Dalsim and Blanca are supernatural entities that, in the midst of this pretty serious backdrop of like terrorism, extortion, this kind of stuff, suddenly you have a green monster running around. You have this man that can stretch, and it doesn't fit in anywhere. For production wise, it would be extremely expensive to do that. Just look at something like Roger Corman's Fantastic Four that came out, I think, a little bit before this, which obviously is a much more low budget, but doing like these stretch animations and whatnot, it would have been so time consuming for what is essentially a throwaway character here. So I think they were just kind of, this also was just really stuck with all these characters that, like, in this setting, even in the original lore, kind of is a little bit out of left field. So what do you do with them in a cinematic sense, where you have 90 minutes to 120 minutes to tell your story? You really can't tell that story.
No, you can't. As you were sort of mentioned earlier about your sort of discovering the film for the first time in the magazines, I think for many of us, I think some of the early photos they put out were of Vega, and you saw him challenging the guy we saw earlier who got electrocuted on the fence in the cage. It just looked spot on to me, even though he had black hair.
There's a good reason why they showed him, because he is the best casting in the film, technically, from a visual standpoint.
Yes.
Couldn't speak a lick of English though.
But it kind of sold you, at that age to sort of think, oh, okay, this film's going to be amazing because Super Mario Brothers had kind of bombed and it didn't really. And there's a lot I like about the Mario Brothers film. I think as a sort of technically, I think it's
from a production standpoint,
it's fantastic.
I love it. Yeah,
it's amazing production design and good photography. But it just completely falls on its arse in many places. But with this, felt like it was a simple idea somewhat, but kind of they've made it really kind of complicated to sort of juggle all these characters, which Capcom has said to De Souza, like, you've got to use 16 of these characters.
I think it was originally 7. I think originally when he got the gig, they gave him the original World Warriors from the arcade game, and he actually kind of was okay with that. And then new challengers came out, Super Street Fighter, and that included all these new characters, which really had no backstory other than like a vague reason to be angry at Bison, right? So you can imagine that what he's essentially trying to do is make a G.I. Joe type movie, where it's just like every character has a little bit of a purpose, and it all leads to Bison. All roads lead to Bison. But for a video game where you pick your favorites, obviously that's going to mean for the game fans that your character simply is not going to get enough time, and you can never ever break away from that.
No, you can't. I mean, it's the animated movie. They sort of decide, okay, we're going to have these characters have a short amount of screen time, and they do feel somewhat shortchanged in that regard. And I think I recall you saying that kind of the live action movie somewhat does a better job of spreading out the screen time to all these characters.
I think so, because it appropriates their setting and kind of brings them together in an organic way with this AN, very clearly based on the UN, and kind of brings their cost together a little bit more focused as a film, specifically as a film, just so people don't misunderstand. I don't think this necessarily is better than the original source material, but cinema is very different from a video game, and here you're just creating factions with a reason, and I think this works much better. And by the way, earlier there we had the introduction of Savada, and I spoke extensively about him on the Blu-ray as well, but just again to bring him up is, Savada was someone that Capcom found in Japan. He was a commercial actor, and he played a samurai for, I think it was a coffee or black tea. And someone at Capcom felt that he represented the spirit of Japan, which is a direct quote. And it was just kind of like, that's the hero of this film. And they hired him. Capcom directly kind of hired him in as their new star, and brought him to De Souza, and De Souza had already founded you. He had Byron Man. So here we have an issue with two to use. How do we pick between them? And it became a simple thing, actually. Which one of them speaks English? Because the script has several lines in English. And it turned out, again, that Savada did not speak English whatsoever. He didn't understand English. He didn't really speak any of it. So that posed a problem, right? He couldn't perform the role of Ryu, even though I think when you watch his filmography after this, because he shows up in like Shinjuku Incident and several other films, he actually did go on to have a career, unlike some reports are saying. He's actually excellent, and physically, he's one of the strongest on-screen fighters I've seen, based on the little work he's done on-screen fighting. He just has a physical charisma that kind of rivals Van Damme, really. He has a fantastic body, he has fantastic form and technique, but he just never got the chance. And I think Savada's own reason, feelings on that, was that this was supposed to be his breakout role. He didn't get it. He became really very much a secondary character that we see twice in the film.
Yes.
And, this caused him to be first of all typecasted. He was just kind of in Japan, he lost all of his other gigs that he already had because he took this exclusive contract with Capcom that they wouldn't let him out of for a while. Which wasn't great. And then when he finally returned, he tried to get his hopes up in Hong Kong. But by the time he got to Hong Kong, the Hong Kong cinema had already started winding down. It was like late 90s. And he pops up here and there, but never got his chance. This is a great shame, because I think maybe not here, being that he didn't speak English, but had he had a proper introduction, something like a Sonny Chiba style movie, I think we would have been talking about Kenya Sawada very differently today.
It was just unfortunate that he didn't get any a scene where he could do some fighting, because you only see him like punch a guy later on, and that was kind of it.
He's in the video game.
He is, yeah. That's the weirdest special move where he basically like commits suicide.
Yeah, seppuku.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so but Byron Mann, he is a better looking guy. He's got more of a sort of leading man look to him.
Well, it comes down to taste, Oliver.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah. But with their, obviously he spoke English, so that was kind of that was the caveat to say, okay, right, we're gonna choose him.
I think what's Byron's strength is that he has a lot of subtlety. He's someone that can be intense, funny. He's someone that can communicate a lot with his expression. And Savada really is a tough guy. So that's probably where the difference would have come in, is that I don't know if Savada would have had the subtlety in his acting.
Also, we had that fight scene earlier, and we saw Benny getting kicked by Ryu, and we see Benny again in a minute, getting on the truck.
Along with there's also the other actor who's he's in a lot of Hong Kong action as well, but he's in the Dragon Bruce Lee story. It's Ong So-han, the tall Thai guy with the buzz cut, and he's the guy who comes and
fights him with the ice, doesn't he?
Yeah, fights with the ice in Dragon Bruce Lee story, and he's been prominent in Sagat's syndicate here.
I think he's in Kickboxer as well.
He's in Kickboxer as well. You're right. That's probably... Yeah. Well, I guess Dragon is a more famous movie, technically, but...
I think so, yeah, for him. I always baffled, though, why does T-Hawk spend the entire film, pretty much, 2/3, with a plaster on his head?
That's a very good question. I think he has the white stripes painted on him in the game, and I wonder if they were just kind of like, well, he can't go around with war paint in his face, even though just because he's native, and I kind of get that. So I guess they put the plaster there, just like, well, it's white, it's a line. So I think that's the reason. Unless he got hurt on set, and it's literally just continuity error.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, obviously, leading up to this moment soon where Guile kind of fakes his own death and then hangs around in the morgue to basically scare Chun-Li, which is kind of an odd execution of its story, but
very strange.
It's amusing, nonetheless.
I love this scene for several reasons, but I really like the team up of Vega and Liu, and I kind of wish we saw more of it, where they just kind of fought their way out of the camp here. But it's a cool little contrast that you don't get from the video games and stuff, which in this film is really something you can do, is do these weird team ups, do this little change of character that you don't have in the original lore, even though here they're just pretending, obviously. But I just think it's like a cool little moment that for fans of the video game, it's like, okay, I like that.
But also, Ken here has to be like pretty spot on with his shot coming up now to get...
Oh, he has to be, man, he has precision, because I mean, look there, they're on like a rocky road. He's just like, it doesn't seem like he's very precise with his hand holding, and shoots him perfectly in that pan. And Van Damme does his best acting in that scene, by the way, when he gets shot, just like throws his head up and screams. And I've done several commentaries officially for Van Damme DVDs and Blu-rays over the years, or over the last year rather, and I'm a huge fan of his acting. I actually think that, and it's probably something you and I will talk about in future commentaries, but I think Van Damme is super underappreciated as an actor, just straight up as an actor. But it's very clear in this film that this is at a time in his career that I don't know if that was his focus. And the choice of him as Guile, we haven't really talked about that, but it totally makes sense from a casting standpoint, the biggest action superstar in the world. Because this is a global film. This is a film that is made for a global audience to make global money. It's not for North America. It's not for Japan specifically. So, and Van Damme's, return by 94, 95 in Europe and North America was huge. Really, way beyond something like a Seagal or these kinds of guys. So I totally understand why they would cast him. It's just, of course, they cast him as All-American Guile. And then it doesn't seem like Van Damme did much research into the character he's playing. So he's just really playing flirty Van Damme. He's basically just playing Van Damme you saw on TV in the talk shows.
It's a funny thing because he got hired to do 5 weeks work, so he got a huge paycheck for doing 5 weeks work, right? So, and he basically, from the reports online, was that he kind of took the piss, arriving late on set, drunk. He was doing his sort of drug abuse phase of his career, but he still remained in shape. He still he said also he didn't rehearse his lines properly, so he'd mess them up a number of times, which kind of frustrated Steven D'Souza. And as you were saying, he was at the height of his career. I mean, I think just finished Time Cop and making his I think that just come out in '94. And then went into this, and this was like Christmas release for America, and then everywhere else is kind of like 6 months later, maybe less internationally. Yeah, so it was certainly the height of his career. And being at that age, when I heard he was in it, I was really excited because it was going to be the first opportunity for me to see him on the big screen. Because I was, like you, for like maybe 3 years, I was kind of obsessed with his movies, and I'd started buying them on tape and started renting them, even by things where the following year or two, like when Sudden Death came out, I was so desperate to see that, but that was slapped with an 18 rating. I was just like, no.
Same. Oh my! You had the same experience as me because, I started doing kickboxing. I was emulating the man. I had the same haircuts as in his films, except for Hard Target because I couldn't pull that off. And it's just he was my idol, and still in many ways I think he is. I still have a lot of regard for Van Damme. And something that's important to note about his behavior, though, was that he was going around. Of course, he had the drinking and the drug habit at this time, and I think he's been honest enough that we can say that. But he was also undiagnosed with bipolar, which just increased, the difficulty of being Van Damme. So it was all leading to a change in his life that came in the late 90s, but it's not all his fault. It wasn't all ego necessarily. It was also, diagnoses they hadn't gotten yet. Oh yeah,
and he always had trouble sleeping as well, so he'd be getting like 3 hours sleep a night. It's one of the great lines that is, isn't it?
Yes.
That was beautiful. It's such a great little. It's a great sequence directed by D'Souza where you've got the camera work and how that camera pans up over this kind of Bisonopolis.
It's fantastic. And I mean, Raul Julia, man. Raul Julia does probably some of his best. I mean, I love Raul Julia in almost everything he's in. He was Gomez. He's the best Gomez. Will always be the most erotic, fantastic Gomez there is. And in this movie, he's the only character that never wavers from what he believes in, because everyone else winks at the camera. All the other characters basically, if nothing else, kind of breaks the fourth wall with their character and is like winks at you. But Bison never does. Bison looks straight into the camera and says, I will take over the world, and you believe him. And that's what kind of ropes the movie together so well. I think that's why the movie actually works, is that Raul Julia is so strong in his performance that all the other silliness, yes, that's there, but it doesn't matter because all in the end, Bison is a threat. So all the other kids can play around the playground, but we all know that Bison means, he's the real deal. And it's something that you have to be a very good actor to pull off. And Raul Julia, bless him, wasn't a fantastic actor and a great get for this. And the story of why he took the film makes it even better, right? The fact that his kids were the fans of Street Fighter. He had no idea. And he knew he was going to probably not make it through his cancer diagnosis. So he was like, I will give my kids this. So it just shows you what kind of person he was. What a great actor and what a great person.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the main reasons people come back to this movie is to watch his performance, and it's very similar to Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe playing Skeletor, where he took on the role because his son loved He-Man, even though I think when he said when his son got to watch the film he fell asleep, but
No wonder.
yeah, but it's a Masters of the Universe is a silly film, but it's all held together by Frank Langella and his performance,
Yep.
and it's pretty much the same as this, and it's both as well dealing with kind of an IP that's kind of for kids, and sort of not being based on toys, but it's based on a video game, but it still has those elements there as well of toys and merchandise.
Well, this would get a toy line, and it actually affected the film's production because the toy line was from Hasbro, I believe, and which were doing G.I. Joe, and they were constantly meddling with like, we need this and we need that. I think the truck that Guile drives through during the Vega cage scene, that was something that was kind of demanded because, hey, we got to sell that truck with the Guile figure. So it's like, okay, I mean, I guess it's in the film.
They miss out loads of stuff though because they don't make the sort of the boat, as it were.
Didn't get the boat. They didn't get you. You didn't get a figure.
It's like they had the stealth boat, and it's like, well, it's a bit like the Simpsons with Night Boat, isn't it? Really. And you had a good theory about it, sort of essentially being the same prop from Thunder in Paradise.
Yes, I think it is a redressed Thunder from Thunder in Paradise. Greatest show of television. I have no idea why that only ran one season. Still cannot figure that out.
Oh, God.
This scene, by the way, is probably... It's one of my favorites just because of how nonsensical it is. Because we have to assume that it's been a day, maybe more, since Guile was shot. I think they do mention that he was shot earlier, actually. So it's the same day, but several hours later. And you can actually see Chun-Li when she goes into the room. You can see, the steam from her breath. So it's a real morgue. And she goes in to find Guile doing what exactly? Is he sleeping? Is he just waiting? What is he waiting on? Did he know this was going to happen? It really brings up a lot of questions. What was Guile doing for all those hours in the morgue, just laying on the bench?
It doesn't really make any sense. I should really quiz Stephen DeSouza on that.
Right? It really does not make sense.
Why? Yeah.
But I love it because it's just I guess it's movie logic, and it's just at the time when I watched as a kid, I didn't blink an eye at it. I was like, oh, he's still alive. That's good. But then today I'm just like, wait, why is he there? Couldn't he just have called her? Like, I really don't get it.
I did when I interviewed Joey Anser, from Assassin's Fist. He was like, he found it so strange that Guile's hair wasn't really yellow; it was kind of orange. It wasn't the blonde; it was just looked orange throughout the film.
It looks very bleached.
Yeah, it's maybe it's, I don't know, early photos you can kind of see it looks more kind of blonde, but maybe sort of color timings throws things out, or maybe because I think that's dyeing it just went a different color.
Yeah, and I don't think Van Damme enjoyed. From what I saw one report from someone that worked on the film saying that Van Damme didn't enjoy tinkering with his hair. He felt like that was kind of one of his essential things, right? Something that made him attractive, which I guess. But he didn't enjoy I think they sprayed his hair by the end of the film, and he didn't like that either. But it creates this inconsistent color, as you mentioned. So
it's like Ace Ventura. No one messes with the do.
I know, right? Got the Capcom barrel here.
That's it, the Capcom barrel we've got, and earlier on in Sagat's kind of office behind the sort of cage, he's got the statue thing from his
got the
level.
Buddha statue, yeah.
Buddha statue, yeah, and obviously, I suppose the cage itself is a reference to Vega's level.
That's from the video game as well, the Vega stage. And then I theorize in the Blu-ray commentary also that this scene to me is the most Street Fighter it kind of gets, because this feels like a stage. You have a crowd that are watching this show that's in the middle highlighted, And actually, in the video game for PlayStation Saturn, this is made into a stage, and it's probably the best new stage of the video game. So it's clear that I think this is it's meant to kind of represent the onlooking stage kind of presence of the video game. And it's kind of surprising to me that they went with only this showcase of barrel throwing, and that there's no like fights between just random fighters, not necessarily street fighters from the game, but just kind of like for Bison's entertainment, it's different martial artists fighting or something.
Definitely.
I'm a bit surprised that it's all belly dancing and barrel throwing.
You want something like out of Django Unchained, where DiCaprio's kind of, just watching these two guys beat the crap out of each other,
right.
As a bet.
Fight club
so
type
you want
situation.
you want something similar to that, but obviously not so extreme with its violence, but there's something there.
Ooh, nice reference there. Something there.
What was it? The character with DJ, I think, was outside of Dowson, was probably the biggest letdown for me in terms of like.
I disagree.
You think? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. DJ doesn't get to do much. He doesn't get to do any fighting.
He's funny. I like that.
Exactly. He's given some of the funniest lines, and I think becomes one of the most memorable thanks to that. And again, that was a character that was really, very new. There wasn't much to him. He's a little bit insensitive, even in some ways. So, I look at him and I'm just kind of like, what do you do with this, Jamaican reggae, guy that just takes out the maracas when he wins a fight? Like, his character really is nothing. So what do we do with it? Well, again, we appropriate everything. We put him into a faction. We make him. I think he says he worked for Microsoft later in the film, so I guess he's an IT guy. But he makes sense in this. He's someone that's out for money, and Bison found his IT guy.
You could look at like Zangief is kind of Bison's muscle, but he doesn't really stand around him to sort of be this bodyguard, so to speak. I mean, maybe DJ could have been that character.
Yeah, you could, but Bison, you also run the risk of you make Bison look weak by having too many strong people around. So, because Bison by himself is pretty menacing, and has to be pretty menacing. I have to mention that my dear friend Chris Ling, who's my boss in Los Angeles, he's a huge fan of this film as well. And for his 35th birthday, I think it was, I actually bought an official Bison dollar movie prop from this store in LA with authenticity seal and all this stuff, and certification. And he got very emotional when I gave him a Bison dollar. Though I don't know what the...
I'd love to get one of those.
Yeah, I don't know what the worth is, because he never got to kidnap the queen. So, but for me, at least, I had to pay $25 for it. So
that's not too bad. That's not too bad for a prop.
There's a lot of them.
They made loads of them, yeah. So I should be able to find one relatively easily. So I'll have to get one.
There is a store in LA. I can give you the address, and I think they at least have 10 of them. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'll do that then.
We haven't really talked about Ming-Na Wen, and I think for most people, generally, general audiences watching this, I think Ming-Na Wen would, next to Zangief maybe, would be kind of like the person they remember from this. Not only because she went on to have an amazing career, but in this film, she does a fantastic job with the character she's given. She really gives Chun-Li this elegance and beauty, but at the same time, again, not a martial artist, but she's someone that I guess, again, thanks to Orquídez, just comes off looking like $1 million and really lives out her role appropriately. And I really think that, from a casting standpoint, Vega, perfect, but he doesn't speak English, so you don't really get much out of him other than, I guess, what you need with the claw and the mask. But Ming-Na Wen is someone that has the acting chops and had the physical chops to kind of uphold, a certain threshold that was expected. So the Chun-Li, even though they changed her from an investigator, and I think she's part of Interpol in the video games, here she's a newscaster, and it kind of serves the same basis anyway. It doesn't, they take one job or another, but she's investigating in both these jobs. and she still is out for Bison for revenge of her father's death.
Well, yeah, it's not a radical kind of leap in job description, like in
No.
comparison, say DJ, who's gone from this kind of a DJ rapper sort of thing character, has gone to play an IT consultant or something. So it's but yeah, I don't think anyone had a problem with her performance at all. I think everyone's always come away quite positive about her interpretation of the character, and the same with Zangief. Zangief is probably definitely, well, I would say my favourite character in the film because he looks the part, he acts the part, and he's hilarious as well.
And this scene,
and he was great in Hudson Hawk.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, this scene here is amazing.
Quick, change the channel. Yeah, that's the best line in the film, and this is definitely something that De Souza was like a master of, right? This comedic timing. All of his action films just have, these instances of humor that works. He's just a really funny guy. And this movie has so many of those moments where they're legitimately well-timed and funny.
Oh yeah, completely agree. How that sort of that scene opened, where you've got the guy selling all the kind of the weapons and missiles, it just reminded me of a sequence in Operation Condor 2.
Yes.
We've got the those the characters you see them at the bottom right of the frame, but they felt like they're sort of same characters you kind of saw who were chasing after Jackie Chan and the sort of location of the hidden gold from the Nazis.
I always theorized, and I guess this also maybe can answer this later in life, but I always theorized that this must have had some severe cuts to it, because off camera, Bison yells like, "Fight Chun-Li and bring her to me," or something like this. And then we have this weird sequence of just overlaid graphics, which you saw there, the map, the headshots, and it just kind of summarizes that they got caught, how they all got caught, because they ran away. So there must have been some sort of action sequence, some chase or something that was cut out. And it doesn't really make sense how this progresses, because now they're just suddenly back at Bison's base. They're all caught, and we don't have any idea what happened, because their plans seem to work flawlessly, where they were magicians with a proper logo and everything. So they went through the whole 9 yards. But, here they are captured. What happened? How did they all get captured?
I would probably suggest because from the footage they show you of the surveillance footage, where clearly they have shot something, where they're sort of getting kidnapped or captured. Sorry, I would suggest it's probably being cut down for pacing, and I thought, well, we can cut through a lot of it by showing you this kind of report of like them being found by Bison and taken to his his headquarters, because the film's got loads of editors on it. I think it's maybe 4 or 5.
There's like 5 of them, credited editors. So there might have been some uncredited too, by the way.
Yeah, so it's quite baffling why it needed like that many people to sort of get it done. Maybe it's down to the sort of the quickness of it all, because they're just running out of time and needed like 5 guys on it.
I think with both studio and Capcom who came in with suggestions there. I've heard, at least from talking to certain people in production, that Capcom brought in a lot of their own team to handle some of the stuff, and it just became kind of like a production mess, because there was so much meddling. And then you had the toy line on the side, which had their requirement. It was really, I really admired this also for bringing out a film that we can watch today and have fun with, because you have to imagine that for your first directorial debut, even though he had a lot of writing experience, I don't think he had ever directed anything other than shorts.
I think he'd done a couple of episodes of TV stuff, like Night
Yes,
Rider,
he had done some TV stuff. But he was someone that I think he got picked especially by Capcom because he had worked with Capcom in the past, and he'd even done the video game. He had done Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. So I mean, what a perfect combination, right? One of the biggest action writers and producers in the world wants to do Street Fighter, but then it's that old tale of like, doing an IP like this is, you have all these plans set out. You talk to the people in charge, and they say, yes, of course, yeah, we got to do that. You get to the dance, and it's all these requirements. And I have to imagine that he must have just kind of like ripped the script into shreds at times, just with all these changes having to be made in mid-production in Thailand. Because this was shot in Thailand for the first part. and then moved, I think, up to Vancouver later on for reshoots. And one thing we haven't talked much about is the fact that they were producing the video game at the same time. Alan Noon's team over at Interactive were producing the official Street Fighter the movie game for arcade, not the console game.
Oh, the Incredible Technologies, yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah. And that required all the actors to do double duty, because when they were not on a set for the film, they were using the sets as well as the characters in costume to digitize the footage. So they were doing all these dances and had to do all these techniques they really couldn't hold for a long time. So it was very difficult based on Noon's own experiences with it. And that was another production that just went through, incredible difficulties, because here they had the official video game being produced with the movie cast, with the production sets, with the costumes, some of which don't even appear in the film itself, the finished film. But Capcom were not going to let an American studio just make a Street Fighter game and eclipse whatever work they had done. Not that I could anyway. But they made it difficult, so they couldn't use the original source code. They could only play the original arcade game and figure it out themselves on set while this movie is being shot. So you have limited time, limited budget, and then limited access from the company itself, which is just insane. You would think that they want to help them. So two production at the same time.
I know that some of the producers who worked on the video game in Japan had flown over to help out the Incredible Technologies guy, to sort of help with the hitboxes and things like that.
By the way, there was a scene there. I just have to cut you quickly because it went by so fast. But there was something on my Blu-ray commentary that I talked about, is that there is a soldier in the background that has a walk-on. You see him from the side. You see his profile. I believe that is Frank Dukes.
Yeah, because when you had mentioned that, I sort of rewound it and watched it. I thought it looks a bit like him, but
it looks a bit like him. And there are reports. This is still during when Van Damme and Dukes were friends, and they were actually working on the script for Kumite during this movie's production, which would become the Quest.
Which would become the Quest, yeah.
Yeah, so I believe it's him, because they were planning on shooting Kumite in Thailand, so all of it lines up. But I can't verify it, but it looks like him. He's same build, same face, same hair, and pretty tall. So I believe that is Frank Dukes. But when I mentioned that in the commentary, I actually got some feedback from various people that really were not happy with that suggestion. It's like, that is not Frank Dukes. He and Van Damme had a falling out in the 90s and whatnot, but during this production they had not fallen out yet. So I do believe that is a uncredited cameo from Frank Dukes.
We do have other cameos though. We have Edward R. Pressman as the chef, who's kind of left sort of hanging around
yes.
when everyone leaves, and then we got obviously the head of Capcom himself.
Yes.
As the AN commander, who's also, he was so obsessed with American pop culture and movies, and he was the sort of driving force behind everything, and now runs a sort of vineyard in I think is it San Francisco, I think.
Yeah, and that vineyard would save Capcom. That was the only way they made money for several years. So talk about weird side projects that hold up a video game company.
Yeah, and also this speech here, which I think Van Damme does a good job at.
Yes, I think so too.
He does. He's on the verge of tears because his parents are there as well, watching him act. So he's got to, turn the notch up a little bit to sort of take a bit more seriously. But he does a good. He's fine here. I don't have a problem with that. As you were saying earlier on about his acting, style in his performance over the years and how he's been criticised. With Street Fighter, I think this is the standout moment for him in terms of his performance, but everything else is he's kind of phoning it in, really, because he hasn't done his research into the character and he's just kind of winging it, as it were.
Well, he was busy showing Kylie his Thailand.
Well, yeah, so he was probably more concerned when the camera stopped and he can just get to have fun and party. But things like Lionheart and AWOL kind of really showed you that Van Damme could act, and he did have an emotional side to him that kind of would show on camera, where Arnold, you have to sort of wrangle him to get the best performance out of him, because you can't let him go in sort of and phone it in, because it's just going to be awful. You need him to sort of give him the right direction, because he's got bucket loads of charisma, but if it doesn't quite work with the role, then it's not going to work on screen.
Well, I think Van Damme, he's someone that this is maybe not so much this, but the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, the action film template is Arnold, it's Stallone, it's all these, and Stallone had done Rocky, so he also could act, but they had turned into these caricatures of machoism, and we really couldn't accept anything else from them. Van Damme shows up, and I think what makes Van Damme different, and what made him, especially for us Europeans, it's kind of like with Christopher Lambert, he shows himself vulnerable on camera, which we emotionally connect with, and he's not afraid to do so, and he's good at it. He's very good at showing emotion through his expression, which the others, as you mentioned, Arnold couldn't really do, and Stallone, for physical reasons, really can't do, due to his paralysis. So Van Damme just has this way of connecting with the audience due to his sensitivities, which were very much on display in real life as well, due to his issues. But it makes for a much more layered acting, and it's something, when he talked about that performance he had earlier with the speech, I always found that a bit offensive, especially now reading back on some of those reviews. A lot of people kind of note the fact that he sounds like, belligerent Belgian, and it's like, well, he is. I mean, he is foreign. He has an accent, but that doesn't take away from his acting ability. If anything, it kind of heightens the fact that, like, he's able to emote via secondary language, which is very difficult to do. I can speak from experience because my first language is not English. So it's like, I've always been impressed by the fact that in this movie, where yes, he phones it in, that speech, I think he gets raw emotion through. Maybe you find it silly in the sense that, like, it is a silly film, but that doesn't take away from his performance. So I always found that criticism by reviewers to be a little bit insensitive.
Yeah. Also, we just saw Bison change his hats. See, what they should have done is had the different hats from Champion Edition, Turbo, so different colours.
Well, that's what they're referencing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it's not like, I think he did have a green hat, so I think they are correct, actually, because there's a white one, which is, no, maybe is that Turbo? And then there's, like, the greenish one, which is Champion. But
yeah, so it is definitely referencing the fact that, like, he has colored costumes like in the video game, which is a cool little nod. Again, there are lots of small nods to the video game in here that they aren't super apparent necessarily, but I think that's, again, something to
the Easter eggs.
You've
got to look for them as a fan. You've got to look for them, and it's because it's not being on the nose about it. And I did like, because in Bison's lair, he's kind of chill out room, as it were, his lounge. He's got all these weapons on display behind his glass, and just kind of reminded me of the extra accessories you'd get with a G.I. Joe figure.
Exactly right. And that chandelier, man, a bone chandelier is amazing. I want that in my living room. That's the prop I was looking for in LA. Where is that today? I actually love the entire set, and this entire scene, by the way, is again Raul Julia just at his best. He's just so naturally confident. He really doesn't feel any any remorse, feels no threat from Chun-Li. He just sits there and is smooth. And you see all these paintings, like these classic paintings of him riding a horse. You have this weird, like, Dali painting there. It's so fantastic to see his ego, his narcissism on display like this. And it, lends a lot to his character. The fact that they have that
that would be magazine. A good prop to have. That Newsweek. I'd love to have that.
I would love it. And I just love the fact that they have somehow Guile and Bison perfectly in profile looking at each other like a versus.
That should have been a poster as well, like an alternative poster for the film. That would have been great.
Yeah. Poor Julie, though. He was very sick during this. I mean, this is at his lowest, probably. And he had stomach cancer.
when he was up against, well, when he spoke to Dowsim earlier on, I think that's his most frail because they had
you
to
can really
the
tell
camera low.
he looks gaunty in there, but you can see here is you do see his weight fluctuate in the film. I actually think, as well as Dalsum, you see very much so in the scenes during the weapons dealer heist where the dancers and all that happens. When he runs out to look for Chun-Li after quick change of channel, you look at his face and you just can tell that, like, oh, he is quite skinny during that shooting, and I think that was during reshoots.
It's a great kick. It's the it's a shame she doesn't have special moves in this, because because ultimately her spinning bird kick would be impossible to do, really, and make it work, because in City Hunter it's done as a joke and it's funny. So she can't really do a sort of what was that, a kick attack she does.
Oh, kick Hawking.
Yes, that's right. That's the fireball, isn't it? That's the fireball she does.
Yeah.
I love how Bison's got his own escape room, hasn't he? Built in.
Yes, a little chamber in case he has to gas people in his living quarters, which makes total sense based on what you've seen so far in the character. You don't really question that. It's nonsensical. Why would anyone build this? But of course he would, because people are out to kill him, and you can just see how narcissistic he is. So, and he also has a button, I guess, where you can flame up his and that smile. But the fighting though in the film. So we mentioned there were 2 fight choreographers. Maybe you have more information than me, because during my research I cannot really find much. But I think Orkides has mentioned that, like, he grounded the fights. And something we talked about in the previous commentary for the animated film as well is that in a video game, you're controlling an avatar. So obviously you have a power fantasy in that sense. So you want to do special moves. You want to do all this fancy stuff and have it being performed on screen, because it's kind of you performing it. But when you do a film, if you just go fantastical from the first minute, the impact of each strike, each kick, each special move, it really, over the film's course, will not seem that impactful anymore. You kind of lose the audience, and it takes you out of it, especially in a film like this, which kind of grounds itself in a certain realism. Later on, not so much. So I kind of understand why they cannot just throw all these chi-based fireballs and spinning bird kicks like you mentioned. You really just cannot do that, because the moment you start doing that, you go into that City Hunter problem where it's just like, this is so silly.
Well, I suppose it would somewhat shift the tone of the movie, and you have to try and explain it to an audience who aren't fully versed in the world of Street Fighter, because it ultimately has to play to a mainstream audience, right, for them to make the money. So they have to sort of have this kind of balance of pleasing the fans, but also pleasing those who aren't well informed, and it becomes a difficult juggling act.
And those who are not well informed will outnumber the fans by
Oh, of course,
4-1. I mean, there's so many more mainstream audiences than there is, especially the '94 video games, big business, but still only in the hundreds of thousands really per region than it is in the millions or billions like it is today.
If it was done now, it would have all the special moves in, because people are far more, used to that. I think even the mainstream audience who have been watching Marvel films for the last 15 plus years are completely comfortable with that. And we saw with Mortal Kombat that, the recent one, that's still throwing in special moves and stuff. So it's not a huge kind of, it isn't like a large pill to swallow for them to sort of accept.
We also have special effects today that can kind of increase the realism of any given special effect. So, like, whereas in this time it would have to been done practically, which then you would have to get Ming Na Wen on a rig upside down, spread her legs, and spin her around on the device, and it sounds like something out of The Exorcist. So it would look silly.
They tried to do it in Legend of Chun-Li, and it's embarrassing.
Oh, it's terrible.
It doesn't work. So, but even though we're trying to sort of, explain why they've chosen not to do that, at the time, when we were both like, 12 years old, whatever, 13, I was pretty miffed that they didn't have the fireballs and stuff like that. I was very annoyed. So I didn't accept it. I was happy to see, Guile do the flash kick and so forth. But you had to sort of re-watch bits and go, oh, that was a special move. Oh, at first you were like, what was that? So
I think it's something they could have built up to better. Whereas I think in the end fights, you could have, and they kind of do, because you do get a flash on screen that I guess is a Hadouken. You do get something looking like the Shoryuken from Damien Choppa eventually. So you kind of get
very half-assed.
It's very weird, yes. It really doesn't get the essence of the game's moves. So I don't disagree with that criticism at all. It's something that by the end of the film, I think one way or another could have been introduced in a better way. Whether or not it would have been straight out of the game, or you find some kind of alternate way to do it. This
falls into the problem that De Souza had, wasn't it? Because he was led to believe, from the second unit team, that they were filming these special moves and including them in the fight choreography, but they weren't. That was the problem. So they had to go back and redo stuff. So, De Souza wasn't going in with the notion of not including them. He wanted them in the film. So, it's kind of a last minute, oh God, we've got to put these moves in because the fans are going to be livid, and complain. So that's what we've got. And what we've got is kind of just hastily thrown in special moves, in particular with Ryu and Ken.
We also have a scene here now where basically everyone is in costume, and the movie takes a while to get there, but again, it kind of makes sense within the movie. They explain how Ryu and Ken gets their karate gis. Chun-Li is explained in the sense that she's made into a muse for Bison. I guess he's into these China dresses, so that works. And then Balrog never, had he just has a t-shirt and shorts, so
it's like underneath his stuff.
That works.
He's a superhero underneath, so he's gonna pull them off.
He never pulls it off. He never, rips it Hulk Hogan style like in the game, though, which is a shame, isn't it? But the guy who plays Balrog is also a very good actor, though. Very believable.
Oh, he's great. He's great. I mean, he had sort of supporting roles, didn't he? Kind of movies. He popped up in Die
character
Hard,
actor, very much so.
At least, yeah.
These boats are definitely. I do. So the production crew have a lot of crossover with two other entities. One is Surf Ninjas, and I believe in Surf Ninjas the AN costumes are reused, or the other way around.
They are, yeah.
So it's been a while since I've seen Surf Ninjas. I know, shame on me, but I'll watch it tonight. But
no, it's awful.
That's our next commentary.
Oh,
and
God.
then the other production crew that I think when they went up to Vancouver, at least, it might have been in Thailand as well, there was a few of the people who worked on Thunder in Paradise that were here as well, and they were also on Surf Ninjas and had worked at the Orlando studios, the stunt facilities. So I think that those boats are redressed from Thunder in Paradise. They're very similar, and I've watched enough Thunder in Paradise to compare them. So and in Thunder in Paradise there were 3 boats being used, so that lines up with how many you see in this film as well. So I'm pretty sure they're redressed. They just put a new top on it, but it even has the same, it can go invisible, it has this little mini turret gun. It's the same thing. So it has to be.
They shot some of it in Australia, didn't they? Because there's quite a few of the press junkets sort of filmed there. Mainly because everyone was quite excited Kylie Minogue was going to be in this kind of big feature film.
We haven't even talked about her.
I know, it's crazy. We were quite late into talking about good old Kylie. And because, for you, Audie, and me, because you watched a lot of the BBC programmes, obviously they've shown Neighbours on TV.
Oh, I watched a lot of Neighbours because my mother loved Neighbours, and I love the opening theme. It's the greatest TV theme of all time. People say Thundercats and stuff, but it ain't got nothing on Neighbours. So, but yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s, she was just like massive, right? And as an amazing pop singer. And she had done a couple of movies beforehand, but I don't think they were big commercial hits. But come this, I was like quite surprised because her career had taken a little bit of a
slump. Yeah,
she'd stopped for a bit, I think, and or some of those songs hadn't quite hit the charts that well. So, but this was, at the time thought, well, this is making the right move for her. But she's been pretty over the years. She always gets quizzed about it as she's asked about her retrospectively about her career, and she always, I think the only thing she said nice about this film was that she got to work with Benny.
Yeah, that's basically what I got about. She actually had some good things to say about Alan Noon's team as well. I think she really enjoyed the video game part and thought it was cool that she was in the video game.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So I think she has good. I think most of the actors today reflect on it. That's kind of like, well, first of all, it was a box office hit. That's something that we need to mention, is that this made money. It made a lot of money. So this
made tons on rentals as well.
Yeah, this was a huge rental. It made good box office money. So this is not a flop, at least from a box office standpoint. And so everyone made money who was in it. But it was a very tough shoot. It was very difficult. It required a lot of scheduling. The Thailand shoot was hot, and the sets were all pretty flimsy. So it wasn't easy to make this film. With all the changes and with all the physical requirements, because everyone, even the actor for Dalston, I believe, had to go through a little bit of training, even though he doesn't do anything physical outside of this, little skirmish here, where he's thrown into the wall. Apparently, he had a bigger role in the original script, but then it got cut down again and again. In the end, he just didn't care. He just showed up on set and was like, "All right, I'm a scientist."
It's interesting that when they show Blanca in like the trailers and stuff, it's very quick cutting, and then when you see him kind of walk out of this machine that's kind of transformed him into this green kind of dude with an afro, they use a lot of smoke to hide him, because really when you see up close, the makeup isn't particularly good. I jokingly sort of said on social media that Blanca looks better in the commercials they did where the kids are playing like Rock'em Sock'em kind of Street Fighter, and Blanca sits down to sort of join in. I was like, yeah, that's really good makeup. It looks like Blanca. But in the film, yeah, I know. I think they kind of dropped the ball on that. And it's such a shame they didn't get one of the guys who'd worked on like Stan Winston's team or some ADI studios.
Get Steve Wang.
Aliens.
Steve Wang had the Guyver Dark Hero and stuff like that. He was cheap.
Yeah, get the guys who worked on the Elm Street films or something to
yeah.
mock something up quickly that looked really cool. But
I can see from a production standpoint, though, like, what is Blanca to the film? Yes, okay, so he's the central kind of motivation for Guile to, he's going to save his friend, Carlos Blanca, who is Charlie Nash in the video games, because his nickname in the film is Nash. And, but, the money spent on a special effect like that for character that you see for, I think it's like total runtime of seeing Blanca is about like 3 minutes, maybe less. So yeah, it's just not worth it. Earlier we saw Kylie fighting, by the way, where she says thrust kick, and that was another Capcom demand was, well, they have to say the name of their moves like in the game. And she doesn't do a thrust kick from the game, she just does a kick which she thrusts into her opponent, I guess.
Some of the teasers and some of the TV spots, that fight scene's kind of been cut down because there's additional scenes where you see them doing stuff. I think, why did they leave that in? And weirdly, like Van Damme's stunt double is doing those kicks, like when the camera's behind. Yeah, so why has Van Damme got a stunt double? He's probably hung over that day or something.
Probably
didn't turn up.
There's a lot of stories of a stuntman on this production. Here's the famous curse word. I guess we can say it, but they ADR'd Van Damme saying shit to get to PG-13, and that's scene.
That's correct. Yeah, that's crazy. Isn't it?
So
it's crazy.
That's your PG-13 right there. But Van Damme Stuntman also came into play for the video game because, and I actually analyzed this when I did a Digital Foundry video on Street Fighter movie, where if you look frame by frame on the character sprite of Guile in Street Fighter movie, the
arcade version or
both arcade and the console versions uses the same footage, so the frames are the same. It's just not handled the same way. They're two different games. But when you look at the keyframes, it's usually Van Damme doing like certain kick techniques and the main stances, the win poses. But every time he falls down or is hurt, it is not Van Damme. It is actually his stuntman.
Oh.
So
Right.
I guess he didn't want to lose in the video game either, which was something famously for Van Damme. He didn't like losing on screen. He didn't mind getting hurt, but didn't like losing. So his stuntman handled all of the frames where he got hit or laid down, which is very strange.
Because Alan Noon, I think he's discussed it a number of times over the last 20 years, whatever, pulling on forums and so forth. But he said that they had to sort of caress Van Damme's ego to make him stay around for another hour or two for the digital capture.
And in the end, they just used a stuntman for like most of the fill-in frames. So it has this weird structure where, like, the stuntman looked very much like him. It's I forget his name, but he handles Van Damme's.
There's a great photo of them together, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think this fight scene here there should have been a fight scene here where, Guile fights Blanca for like a minute or two, then to sort of shake him back to normal.
I think is another example of Van Damme being a fairly good actor in this scene, though, when he kind of emotionally deals with the fact that his friend has transformed and has to basically, kill him. He reacts very well to that. You can tell that there's inner turmoil. And again, that's something you would never get out of Seagal. That's something you never really would get out of Arnold and Stallone, who at this time were coming back with like Demolition Man, Eraser. They were going back into their old ways as well. So the competition was pretty fierce in the action scene. But you look here at Van Damme's acting with, it's kind of a silly scene in the sense that there's a pink-haired green man, this weird creature. But he nails it. He does a good job. So it's something that he can internally communicate and respond to, which is a sign of a good actor.
I think the photography coming up in a minute, actually, when sort of Dowsim kind of stops him from shooting. Dowsim explains what's happened. And there's a good shot of Van Damme where the lighting's there. It does look spot on. I think there's a couple of good shots later on where I think, wow, that's a really well photographed moment. But I think down to sort of hastiness and how it's been, the rush photography, there's moments where the DP could have done, I think, a bit more of a better job to create something a little bit more dynamic. Because it's quite a smoky-looking film. It's very heavy on the grain as well. There's kind of odd inconsistencies with its transfer over the years. I think down to the fact they shot it on Super 35, but so you're always going to have that inherent extra grain there. But D'Souza said in the commentary for his film he recorded for the Laserdisc that he felt the pan and scan version of the film was kind of more faithful to the game. He didn't really divulge too much into why he thought that. I think maybe it's down to because of you're playing the game on a square box and it's sort of
you have the 4x3 in the game, so I could kind of see his point, and the fact that it scrolls, once you reach the limits of the screen, it scrolls side to side. So I guess as an effect I would agree with him, but I generally do not think pan and scan is any way to watch a film, regardless.
Oh god, no. No.
So
no. This could have been a 185 kind of movie instead of 2351 because it's quite far zoomed in, really, on the frame.
It's not shot it's not shot interestingly. Other than you have these scenes here with the blue tint, which has something going for it.
Makes it a bit more dynamic. Yeah,
it's a little bit more dynamic, but for the most part, it's pretty flat. But I always feel like these scenes, again, kind of harkens back to something of a Universal monster film with Blanca.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Blanca in itself is made into something of a Frankenstein monster, which obviously is a Universal property. And it's something they could have played up a bit more, because Blanca is really out of the film by this point. That's it. Dhalsim and Blanca, they show up again later on. Somehow Dhalsim is bald.
Sorry, I love this bit here where Van Damme does the Superman leap. It's just
he leaps pretty far
without no run up,
Yes, he just jumps out. I guess there's just spring and the chair seat.
Yeah. And we've got the stuntman, and then we've got Van Damme.
We got Van Damme, yeah. That's clearly a stuntman if you freeze frame there. The bell, by the way, in the
it's
middle.
It's like Dolph Lundgren, isn't it?
Yes. The bell in the middle of the screen there is actually a reference to the bell in the Thai stage in Street Fighter.
That's right.
So it's another not video game.
I suppose it would have been interesting to sort of what would Street Fighter look like in reality and live action, because it's trying to decide the look of the movie in working with the production team. But I suppose it's try and make it somewhat feel like that sort of pop look to it, which is like music video classic stuff, like Thriller, with those colours.
Yeah, so it would be. It's first of all, it would kind of date the movie a little bit, as you mentioned there, because the locations of Street Fighter are kind of in themselves a bit dated by now and by the time of the film. But the other issue there is the sense that, it's a globe-trotting game, World Warriors, and so you would have all these locations around that's something that the animated film has an issue with, where you're all in all these different locations, but you're just kind of like, how did they get there? What's time lapse that's happening between them? How long does this take? How did they get there? That's always a problem when you're doing film. Here, I think this also again the good thing of kind of putting everything in one setting. They're in this. I think it's based on Thailand. I mean, it is shot in Thailand. I don't know if it's supposed to be in Thailand. I forget.
Well, I think it's supposed to be, but it's just a fictional city.
It's the fictional place where
town of Shadowloo.
Yeah, Shadowloo. Whereas in the game it's Shadow Law. That's Bison Syndicate. But you have this for the bell. You had the Buddha statue in Sagat stage. You had the cage in Vega stage. Earlier we saw when Guile ran to the docks. They're on the dock with boats in the background. So that's like Ken's stage. So they tried to kind of get some of these stages brought into the film, but within the logic of the film as well. Like, so the fact that it is a Thai dock, it's not on like the San Francisco Bay Area, but it's still a dock. A dock is a dock, right? So, and a boat is a boat. So, something that doesn't make sense later, I think, at least, if maybe I'm misremembering, but I think Balrog gets boxing gloves, doesn't he?
He does, he finds
he
them,
puts them on, and I'm always just kind of like, what? I mean, I guess his hands would do better of it, but would it really assist him in these fights?
Yeah, because in the anime, because Balrog doesn't bother with his boxing gloves, he just decks Honda, bare knuckle,
I love this also. So they've been feeding him all this stock footage.
Wouldn't it have been good? As the stock footage was of Neighbours?
I know. I was going to say the same thing. It should have been the Neighbours theme song. But yeah, that was another shocking thing that I didn't think about that as a kid. But when I watched it again for the Blu-ray commentary, I was watching the stock footage and I was like, I feel like I've seen these in other places. And I looked it up, and it's real atrocities and murder and stuff that's being shown on screen. So I mean, PG-13 could have just gone straight to that stock footage they feed Blanca. But it's pretty gruesome stuff. DeSouza's
son cameos here, doesn't he, as well?
Yes, that's right.
He throws the grenade, I think.
These scenes show up again, the PlayStation Saturn game. This is part of the cinematics. This whole infiltration scene here. They keep using this again.
We saw T-Hawk. They repeat a shot of T-Hawk doing his sort of uppercut, but in the teaser you see him do a drop kick, and that's cut out of the.
That's cut out. Yeah.
Cut.
It seems to be a lot of kind of small moves. I loved it. I love how DJ just sneaks out while Bison has this wonderful moment of glory.
See, in the pan and scan version, you get to see Kylie's bum there. When she fires the bazooka and bends down.
I see. Well, that's Oliver Harper's research right there. This to me makes also very little sense. The fact that you have this dissension between Ken and Ryu at this point, where it's just like
Ken is still fixated on money, isn't he? He's all about. He's still very self-centered,
I guess so, but that's not been established good enough for it to have any weight by this time of the film. Like, to me, it just comes off as kind of like, why would you just do this at this moment where impending death seems pretty clear? Why would you just let's split up?
Yeah, well, they should have had a line when they were tied up and Ken and Ryu just sort of bicker, and then Ken just I just need something about the money. Just talk about the money, something like that.
I think this might have been cut out from either they shot it or they didn't. But I think in the script there are certain scenes where Liu is kind of being converted to the good side, so to speak. So it's probably something that's cut for a time. This
was Van Damme's own gag, wasn't it? I think
this is Van Damme's own idea, and it works. I mean, again, it's something that he looks at his own sensibilities. He knows he can pull off comedic timing. He is pretty funny. He has done comedy since this, which was like Welcome to the Jungle, which is a terrible film, but Van Damme is fantastic in it. I don't know if you've seen that.
Who directed that?
Welcome to the Jungle?
Yeah.
I forget who directed it, but it was a pretty recent film, and at least by the time of this recording, where his daughter has a cameo in there. And there's all these different comedians, but it's just an unfunny film. And
because I know he worked with Peter Hyams again, but I don't know.
No, it's not Peter Hyams. No. It's this Welcome to the Jungle was just like he doesn't have a huge role in it. He plays like a tour guide that is practically insane. But
it was Enemies Closer. That's what Peter Hyams
did. Yeah, that's the other one where he plays a bad guy.
Yeah. Oh, this scene here is the great moment of the lines from the video game when Bison will beat you or Guy will beat you, and they've got the profile of Bison, haven't they, perfectly?
Yeah. Bison is lined up perfectly. There you can see. If you line it up with his character portrait after the fights in World Warrior, it actually lines up perfectly. Van Damme is off, so I don't know if that was for any good reason or not, but Bison is perfectly shot. By the way, you got that muscle with the American tattoo there.
He's wearing his blue. He's wearing the turbo outfit, isn't he?
That's right. And here's Sawada's only really moment in the film.
Yeah, it's a shame, really.
It's funny, the Godzilla scene here, where they just look confused as they wrestle on top of Bisonopolis with the Godzilla sound effects. I don't know where those are coming from.
It's a good gag. It's
a great gag. It's really funny, but it really makes no sense. I mean, and then you have Raul Julia here fighting. I mean, doing a lot of his own stunts. I was surprised when I was doing research how much he actually did. Because I figured, he has the perfect costume and layout for not doing most of this himself. But apparently he pushed himself to do as much as he could. So kudos to him.
There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff you can see Raul Julia sort of doing the fight scenes. And there's some interesting bits they cut out. But also, I think the editing during the sort of the fight on the spinning dome thing, or platform, is way too choppy.
Yes, it is really...
Which is a shame.
I actually think the whole fight scene in general is sort of choppy. It's very... Both from Van Damme and... Raul Julia I can understand, but Van Damme I don't understand why there's so much intersplicing with his stunt double. You can tell by all these long shots here. A lot of it is his stunt double, which I understand for the flash kick, because Van Damme isn't... Well, he is a pretty... athletic guy, so I'm sure he could do it.
He can jump high.
He can jump very high, but he's not a flipper. And also, that sort of stuff comes with a risk, so you don't want your main star hurt. So I understand why that's not done by him, performed. But there's a lot of these other things where it's just straight up, he had the double sweep from the game. He got the roundhouse kicks, which...
That's a good kick. So well choreographed that kick is,
That
smooth.
kick to the back of the head there, fantastic.
That's the hard target move, isn't it?
Yep. I mean, Van Damme's technique. People always criticize his martial arts. That was the thing, right? Because he was on. That was something that came from him being in Black Belt and Impact, all these martial arts magazines back in the 90s. So there was a lot of jealousy. Was one thing. And then you remember the whole criticism of the fact that he wasn't a martial artist. He was just a ballet dancer that became a movie star, and there was no record of his fights. And it's sort of so silly because he maintained all the time. Yes, I was, but people don't care to do the research because he did the fights under his real name, not Van Damme, but Varenberg, is it? So
that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so he, his records were not under Jean-Claude Van Damme. And really, shame on a lot of those journalists and whatnot and martial artists that just didn't do their due diligence. I mean, of course, this is prior to the internet, but at the same time, just put two and two together as an actor. Maybe he has a different name. But I think a lot of jealousy he wasn't the best martial artist. He wasn't on the level of a Hong Kong stuntman. And
well, no, because I was always wanting him to do sort of something more interesting with the fight choreography instead of just relying on one kick or a punch. You know what I mean?
3 times in a row.
Yeah, the double impact attack.
Yeah.
So it's I always kind of wanted more from Van Damme. If I was a fan directing him, I'd say, oh, let's do this. More blocking techniques, sort of, counter attacks. But he just ends up with, I suppose it's the same attitude of like, he saw Bruce Lee fighting. Bruce Lee would take people out with one punch, one kick, in like Enter the Dragon.
Maximum impact. That's what it comes down to, It's just because I think from a sensibility of like a Western action film or even a martial artist, point fighting and this sort of stuff, it's the singular strike that hits that matters. All the stuff in the middle is just a dance. And in Hong Kong, of course, that dance, the whole choreography is an art. Whereas in the US, it was all about just kind of like, no, look strong. And Van Damme is someone that he's sort of made for video games. By the way, this scene here, when you see them entering the stage, is very video gamey. Into the spotlights, by the way. There's 2 spotlights on the floor there. Why, I don't know.
Round 1.
Right. So, very video gamey. But, for Van Damme, he's someone that's kind of built for a video game because he's all about keyframes. He's just about that straight kick that hits you in the head. And he stands there for 2 extra seconds holding the kick up. Just so you can see his balance and his strength, his leg strength. And so I get it. I understand why he made his fight scenes like that, but he should have evolved probably better by the 2000s. But at that time, he was dealing with his bipolar, so I think he lost out on some time.
He has to fight. He does a pretty good job in Knockoff. He's pretty fast in that. Maybe it's down to they're shooting at a sort of a different frame rate, but sort of as they do in Hong Kong.
Well, I think it's 2 things. I mean, that was shot in Hong Kong, and same with Double Team, which I did the commentary for as well. There's certain fight scenes there where there is a lot of stuntman in there, and in fact, Sammo Hung is one of his stunt doubles in Double Team, believe it or not.
On weight,
Yeah. But you see some of the techniques where you see it's him, and Mickey Rourke, for that matter. And it's much faster, it's much better. And I will say that The Quest, which is not my favorite of his films, but there are some of those fights, especially against the Five Animal style,
yes,
Kung Fu guy.
He's doing a little bit more.
There's a flow to that, and he choreographed that. And I'm just like, man, if you just got 5 more minutes of that in The Quest, it would have been awesome, because it needs more fights, and you can tell that Van Damme is pushing himself and that he can do it, because that's the thing about him, is that if he just got the confidence from certain people to do a little bit more, then he probably would have at that time. But he relied too much on what he knew, because he was, of course, his career was not going the path he wanted, and he was not being respected for his acting, which by Maximum Risk, Time Cop, that time, I think he should have been much more highlighted as an actor, because he does a fantastic job in those films. So I kind of get why he relied so much on tried and true Van Damme. And today he's much older, but he still looks like $1 million.
Yeah, you can still do a lot of, he's still very fit and healthy. I love that at the background there is Honda's stage, the sort of mural on the back.
And there it is, Hadouken.
Which is like someone taking a photograph on camera, isn't it?
Just a photographer forgot to turn the flash off.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And the actor, I forget the name of the actor for Sagat, but I mean, another, he was in The Last Mohicans. Yeah, and he was in The Last Mohicans. I mean, super well-respected actor and really miscast. I mean, he has the intensity, and I know that's what they were looking for. They were looking for the intensity of Sagat, but they really needed a tall guy that could throw a kick.
I thought, when I was a kid, I saw Kickboxer, and I saw Tong Po. Is it Tong Po?
Tong Po. Should have been Tong Po.
Because I thought, wait a minute, did they base him off Sagat in Street Fighter? Such an idiot. But I was just like, whoa, he could have been Sagat. He was just ginormous,
There you got Tatsumaki in this film. A little bit different from the animated film that we talked about last time. But I mean, they're getting all the moves in here, and it's clear that this scene is kind of put in there as a way to get all like we need the special moves in. So they're putting the Shoryuken, the Hadoken, Tatsumaki. They're getting all these moves in.
I think Sagat does do a tiger knee in the background.
He does do, yes.
Jump at each other.
So, and I don't know the story of the fight choreographer, because Benny was one, but then there was the other, and I know that the other, I think he was French. The other coordinator kind of threw Benny under the bus from the reports I saw, just saying that like he didn't know what he was doing and whatnot. And from what I've seen of Benny talking about the film, he has pretty high regard for everyone he worked with. And when I spoke a little bit to Byron Man via email, and then some other people on production, and man, no one loved anyone more than how Benny was loved. Everyone loved Benny, just everyone. No one had a bad word to say about him.
He's like, in the interview, he's for the documentary, he's super friendly, super nice, and just happy about being involved and enthusiastic.
Yes, I really don't know what happened. Was he injured, or why was he only here for half the time?
I think it's one of those things where no one's going to really want to admit to who took the responsibility of not doing their job basically on the thing, because there's multiple articles with just kind of conflicting reports, isn't there? I think the whole film could have a documentary itself.
It should.
100 hand slap there. That was quite cool.
Yeah, another move. Then I also saw the hostages, which kind of it's introduced in the beginning of the film. You see them a few times, but it really falls out of the film eventually. You forget that the hostages are there, because it's all about the conflict between the characters. So you have all these hostages that the leverage of them isn't really brought up much. It's just like, oh yeah, they're there too. Oh, thank God they saved them. I wouldn't have noticed if they didn't, but
I don't know. They should have thrown in sort of Capcom USA employees as the prisoners, shouldn't they?
Yes, they would have probably lived out a very natural role being there. I love this scene too, by the way. Zangief just has the best lines.
Are you totally demented, man? You got paid? He's like... Oh, it's great.
I just love, and he looks the part. He's probably the one that looks the most the part, maybe.
Oh God, yeah. It's like he's done his research as well with the character.
Well, he was born to play him.
Oh yeah.
Really should have gotten his own film or TV series, right? Just like spin that off, because the animated cartoon is based on the film. It uses the video game designs, but the plot is loosely based on the film. It uses some plot points in some of the episodes. So there was a sequel planned. I don't know from the Zosa if he was planning to be part of it, but Capcom had already production started in the sense of like pre-production for a sequel, and a lot of the things in the film is actually laid out for that.
It is. Well, it ends just like Masters of the Universe, with baiting a sequel. Well, De Souza said that because Marvel had done the comic adaptation, there was talks that a sequel would basically be in comic book form, because I think the idea of maybe doing a film had maybe sort of shifted to being a comic, because just the investment and the trouble of making it, perhaps. But that didn't really come to anything either. So, the TV show would ultimately sort of continue it in some, as you say, some sort of loose way. It's a weird thing, wasn't it, for this whole... as a fan of Street Fighter, we've got so much stuff, but not... I don't think everything fully delivered on what the fans wanted. I think there's just too much happening in a short space of time.
And I think general audiences probably couldn't connect enough with characters to have like this awkwardness that like, well, how do you do a sequel really with 16 characters, because they all survive. So they have to come back.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you couldn't kill them off because Capcom will be furious. So you'd I mean it's they should have just started smaller and then gone on to this one be the sequel, and then you start out with the 8 characters, the World Warriors. But Capcom, still would have said no, because they wanted everyone to be in it.
Yeah, because the mandate was that every character is someone's favorite, so they all have to show up and kind of have equal amounts of time, except for the main cast like Guile, Bison, Ryu, but that makes no sense on the big screen. Like, you cannot do that. You can do cameos, you can do hints, but some just have to be left out, and you have to look at the script and say, well, what is what's driving this film, and what characters don't really contribute to that plot line, and then take them out, and then introduce them in a sequel maybe, or something like that. So there's all these other scientists that we haven't seen. We've only seen Dalsim, and we really don't know why Dalsim was part of that program. He seems to be a very nice man. We also don't know why he went bald at the end there. But it's kind of like a...
I love how Sagat's got his scar now from Ken. They've changed history. It's not Ryu. Oh my god.
Unless he had it already. But he seems to be meeting them for the first time at the beginning of the film. So who knows. But here you have these wonderful shots of everyone. I think these scenes are pretty well laid out with the ensemble cast together. It's a shame we don't really get that earlier in the film, where I think we should have had a scene with all of them kind of like at opposite ends of one another. And then here at the end they come together. It would have given a little bit more weight to, first of all, this reveal of Guile surviving and everyone being so happy. Because most of these people don't really have any relationship to one another, so it's like, why do they care that much?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I think only Ryu and Ken and Chun-Li would probably have some sort of like worries about Guile to a certain degree.
You saw Ming-Na Wen do the jump there, by the way, the little jump with a happy jump that she does in her victory pose.
It is like when you see them all together, it's just like some crazy cosplay.
Yeah, and that's another issue with like comic book films and everything, especially in the 90s, was that we didn't have the costume technology where like that came with the X-Men, where you kind of change it all to leather and lycra, but like at this time it really comes off as bad cosplay if you just put them in the costumes from the game with all those primary colors that for a CRT video game is supposed to stick out. If you do that in the film, they just, as you say, it looks like cosplay. It looks like bad cosplay. And you could see that in like a Korean TV show based on Street Fighter. They use straight up the costumes from the game, and it looks terrible.
Yeah. And I see, because I'm a big fan of the Chris Reeve Superman films, and you see fans wear the suit what Chris Reeve wore, like obviously replicas, but it just doesn't work because it only works on Chris and how he kind of shows himself on camera and how he poses.
It's built for his body.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go. The winning poses. Guile should have used his brush earlier just to brush his hair now and again to sort of keep it.
Vaya
for
con
Raul.
Dios.
Was it well? Exactly.
Yeah, his last film for Raul Julia. I mean, there was another film that was released after his death, but this was the last one he produced.
And obviously, with the soundtrack, which we didn't really discuss much of at all, like obviously Graham Raval did the score. I think it's a great score to the film, even though it's nothing to do with Street Fighter. I think Graham had said he'd maybe hinted at some of the themes from the game, but I can never find.
No, I saw that as well. I've listened to it several times. But I am a big fan of the soundtrack of licensed music with MC Hammer, and you said something there earlier, and Chaga Asuka from Japan. It's a huge pop duo. They did something there for the soundtrack, and I think it shows up in the credits later on. I think
it is, and also you'd pointed out something quite interesting, because in the Sega Saturn PlayStation game, once you complete it, you unlock the music video. But this is something you told me a couple of months ago, was that Van Damme is in the music video, but only in certain
territories.
Yeah, territories. Yeah.
So the music video in Japan for TV, Van Damme is actually in that music video. However, he was. I think it has something to do with likeness rights or association in Japan, where it was something where he couldn't show up for the music label in other territories. So they had to cut him out, and then for the international release of Street Fighter movie game on console where you unlock it, all the scenes with Van Damme there is cut out. But I did show you, I found the original where Van Damme is prominent. He's there all the time.
It's like they've taken him. It's like he's gone between he's shooting Maximum Risk, and he's just got to go quickly shoot like this music video because
Yeah, he has a completely different hairstyle, and he's much more rugged. So he probably did go off the set of another film just to do Chug and Asuka. And I would too, because that song is amazing.
It is a good song. Straight to My Feet is funny though, because Van Damme is clearly loving it and he's
Oh,
enjoying himself. Probably
he is so
totally...
happy. That's at him at his happiest. He's just dancing and having a good time with MC Hammer, and who wouldn't?
Oh yeah, it's a cheesy video. I love that song. And also Ice Cube did a song, Street Fighter. Yeah, which isn't too bad. It's like the album sold extremely well apparently, and so did the score. So it's an interesting sort of spin-off stuff to the actual video game. It's just a shame that they didn't kind of pay a little nod to the music from the game, because it's so iconic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little bit more at least. Apparently it's in there, but
for me, this is a guilty pleasure movie. I'll always love it. I completely acknowledge all its flaws and mistakes and errors, and it upset me. It didn't really upset me. It just kind of, I just wish it went a different direction when I was younger. My friends around me kind of hated it, and then they kind of warmed to it later on. I've always kind of liked it because I'd absorbed everything, and I kind of, as a fan, I suppose I was kind of in denial. I suppose a bit like Star Wars fans with Episode 1. It's like it's not very good, but I still love it. But yeah, I love it for all its faults. And everyone has guilty pleasure movies. Everyone has movies they love, but they completely acknowledge are terrible, and everyone hates it. But it doesn't matter. It's a cult classic.
I think as long as you have fun, a fun time is a fun time, and this movie provides so much fun. It has funny one-liners. It has good action. The action, from fights to gun action, it's good. It's choreographed well, and just general pacing isn't terrible. There's a lot of characters, but the pacing in itself isn't bad. It flies by pretty quickly. This commentary felt like half an hour for me. So,
I had to cram in so much stuff near the beginning because so much was happening. It's just like, I
know, right? You should, for those who, if anyone's listening to this and felt like, we didn't really talk about this or that, check out the 88 Films Blu-ray, because I did a commentary on there with John Lindman, and we actually go into a lot of the production of the video game on that, as well as some other difficulties on set. So I guess they complement each other. So there is more Street Fighter, and hopefully one day you and I can do an official commentary like that.
Talk about Street Fighter again
for another label.
Well, coming up shortly is the sequence that pays a nod to the sort of setting up a sequel, which I, at the time, when I saw it in cinema, I kind of, as soon as the credits started rolling, everyone kind of leaves anyway, so I didn't see it till when it was on VHS. But it's nowadays, any superhero film, you're expecting there to be something that nods at a sequel, a little, post-credit sequence, and but this was kind of a rarity at the time, because the only thing I knew, and the only other film I knew had done that was Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, same. That was the only other film I knew, and they're identical. The way they're handled, and I think this also worked on Master of the Universe, didn't he?
No, he didn't. No. I think it was David Odell who wrote that. Who wrote things like...
I'm not a huge He-Man guy, so He-Man fans out there, just leave a comment saying I'm an idiot.
Well, it's weirdly, they don't credit having DTS sound, but this movie really pushed DTS surround sound, but there's no credit for it there, which is weird.
It's strange. But yeah, here you go. I mean, you have all this rubble. We believe Bison to be dead, but things are afoul.
Because it's nodding at, as the idea of putting another credit in and continuing, but it should have had, maybe just thrown in the sound effect of the...
Well, he had the arcade board on his floater, right? On his little... So just show, the press one button there or something. But yeah. World domination.
That should be the sequel, you know what I mean? Street Fighter World Domination. Well, everyone, that is the end of the commentary. Me and Audi will be back soon, providing some commentaries to a select number of episodes from the TV series of Street Fighter, the animated show that was released in the USA, which I don't recall seeing growing up. I think it might have been on Fox Kids, network, perhaps,
I
on
think
cable?
in syndication it did play on Fox Kids in Europe, but I never saw it either until they released the VHS cassettes, and then I imported those. And yeah, in the commentary we can discuss the horror of discovering what exactly this was.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the commentary. And as I said, me and Audi will be back very soon. Take care and goodbye.
Vaya con Dios.